Knock, knock. Satoshi. Satoshi who exactly? In 2009, an anonymous developer or group of developers released Bitcoin, and it was not a joke. It was the first time in human history that a computer program was able to enforce what we call digital scarcity. Okay, this created a new kind of Darwinism. And Darwinism relies upon scarcity, the scarcity of resources. When there is scarcity of resources, entities must compete for those resources, which results in a situation of survival of the fittest, those best adapted to their environment. Darwinism is sometimes referred to as natural selection, the ability of a system to refine different attempts at adaptation to better suit their natural environment. In essence, a biological system becomes more and more adapted to its natural environment. It is simple, it is natural, and it is very elegant. Digital scarcity means that a digital asset, unlike the kinds of digital assets that existed before, such as music or photos, they can't be copied an infinite number of times. Real items in the physical world are by their very nature scarce. There are only so many pieces of metal in the world, for example. So we started using scarce resources as money about 9,000 years ago, when shells on the beach were collected and gathered and traded and sometimes turned into shells. Soon after that, we began using rocks, like on the island of Yap, that uses very large donut-sized boulders to represent ownership of land. So metals were then used because the amount of effort to find them, to mine them, refine them, and put them into their element as coins is very difficult. And at that point, they were stamped with the ruler's face, and that was to ensure validity. So eventually they began to store that metal in depositories to keep it safe because it's difficult to move. And they were given, in exchange for that deposit, a paper receipt. People began using those paper receipts as money. So now we can communicate data across vast global networks, which made the paper into plastic and then into bits floating in the cloud. Well, the digital transformation of money began a few decades ago, but now it's moving at light speed. Algorithms now define how much money exists, what happens when it moves, and who controls that asset. Bitcoin, when it was released, defined a balanced system of users, nodes, and miners, each incentivized to follow the rules of the system, limiting the number of coins in existence to 21 million, and ensuring that if the math is done correctly, participants on the network get rewarded appropriately. You gain value by following those rules. Ethereum was released and extended this concept by allowing for the creation of algorithmic smart contracts. And EOS extended this even further by creating delegated proof of stake, where you get to decide who gets to make decisions on your behalf. The EOS DAC actually uses this to create worker proposals, which the participants then vote upon. Altcoins then arose, and each one was tweaking one small variable to try and make their currency more attractive and more competitive. See, the value of all of these cryptocurrencies, it was wildly fluctuating. Okay, the price was all over the place, and nobody wants to use money where they can't be sure how much it's worth. So that's why we created Tether, an asset-backed stablecoin, a cryptocurrency with a fixed value, because it was tied to something scarce in the real world, the dollar. We used the Omni layer on Bitcoin, an application framework designed to allow for the creation of tokens and assets on the blockchain. Ethereum, very shortly thereafter, began supporting ERC-20, a proposal for how to define new currencies on the Ethereum blockchain. See, now that's standard on all blockchains, the ability to create a new asset out of thin air. They can be created, like with an ICO, in response to movement. You send me X tokens, the contract will send you Y tokens. Okay? Or they can be defined by commands from the issuer onto the blockchain, like Tether. If there's a dollar in storage, there's a token on the blockchain to match it. See, stablecoins are stable because they reflect the value of the underlying asset. In Tether's case, it's the dollar. But what if the dollar itself begins to move its value relative to other assets? See, now you need a stablecoin with some form of insurance, some other asset or algorithm to prop up the value against all other assets, the thing to stay stable when everything else can't be. See, with blockchains, we have value movement with cryptographic certainty. And now we have coins that provide cryptographic privacy. See, to what environments do you think that's best suited? You have to think about friction. Friction is resistance, something that stops the flow. On the Bitcoin network, Bitcoins actually only serve one purpose. They're the spam filter, okay? It costs something to record a message to the network. If it didn't, anyone could flood that network with nonsense messages and actually kill the network. So Bitcoins are the immune system of the Bitcoin network. Bitcoins themselves provide friction. See, that means that cost is friction on a decentralized network. If the cost is too high, the value simply will not flow. On a permissioned ledger, which is not a blockchain and very different from a blockchain, access to write to that ledger is friction. Somebody else gets to decide who and what can write to the ledger. Okay? And that means, therefore, censorship is friction. See, water flows downhill without friction. Okay? It finds a way to make the shortest and easiest path to its destination. Electrons and photons flow between atoms in space without friction, and they create nebulae and stars and planets and galaxies. In the same sense, money moves where there's the least amount of friction. Okay? This is the lesson. This is what we have to come to understand. If you add unnecessary friction to these systems, money will simply not flow, and natural selection will make you extinct as a currency. That means everything, and I mean everything, comes down to governance. Okay? All blockchains are an experiment in governance. Who gets to set the rules, who gets to change the rules, and who gets to decide who gets to change the rules. Okay? The founding fathers of the United States of America did something astounding. They created the first smart contract. It's called the US Constitution. Okay? It defines the branches of government, who is responsible for what actions, how they're selected, elected, and appointed, and what they can do and when. We're now on the verge of creating completely decentralized governance systems. And every time you use a cryptocurrency, you're casting a vote for a particular governance system. Your identity and the value you hold are the messages that the network uses to determine its viability. We will see competition in these government systems and in all of these currencies. And some will win and some will lose. What we must ensure is that we do not accept systems that trap us, that enslave us, or prevent us from moving the value that we create in between one another. This is the competition. This is the race. This is the natural selection. So the question is, will we be the creators of our financial destiny? Only one person in the world can answer that question. Thank you.